FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And welcome. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. This is Kerry Lutz. And hey, when the rubber meets the road, we're all libertarians, or at least we'd like to think we are. And the government has been trying to basically tighten the leash since the internal combustion engine was invented over 100 years ago, because driving, hey, it's the ultimate form of freedom. You hit the road, you're on your own, or at least you think so, but we know better. And we've got Eric Peters on with us. His site is ericpetersautos.com, and great site. Just became aware of recently. The byline is automobiles, motorcycles, and libertarian politics. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Hey, so you had a real interesting article that caught my attention back on March 26th. No more speeding for you.
Yeah. Yep. This article is about the latest suite of electronics that's being incorporated into vehicles. This particular thing is a speed monitor and a speed controller that Ford will be rolling out in Europe in some of its models there, and inevitably this is going to find its way to vehicles sold in this country. To give you some background to this, I review new cars. I've been doing that for about 20 years, and as GPS began to be popular as a factory option in cars, a couple of years ago, I began to notice that as you drove down the road, looked at the map, I noticed that the little speed limit icon would pop up, and it would update in real time if you went from, say, a road that had a 55 mile an hour speed limit down to a 45 mile an hour speed limit. Well, the little icon would change, and I thought, wow, that's interesting and that's informative. Well, about a year or so went by, and the next step happened. I noticed that the speed limit icon would go from a representation of an actual speed limit, the white background with the black numerals, to glowing, angry red if you drove faster than the speed limit. The car knew immediately if you drove faster than the speed limit on the road, and it would try to dissuade you from doing that or shame you from speeding by showing you this little icon. And I got to thinking about that and thought, wow, that's fairly creepy. That means that they can keep track of my driving in real time as I go. Well, the Ford system takes that the next step farther. It actually intervenes electronically, and the car's computer, which controls all of the mechanical operation of the vehicle, will actually prevent you from driving faster than the speed limit. It will know what the speed limit is on that road, and if you attempt to drive faster, it acts as an electronic governor, dialing back throttle and so on, so that you physically are not able to speed.
Really? Yep. And we're just supposed to put up with this and be happy about it. And what gets me, Eric, is that the interstate highway system that we all know and love was designed for cars 20 years ago to safely drive the system 85 miles an hour. Today's cars are a whole lot safer. Actually, it was designed for cars 45, 50 years ago.
I was going to correct you. Yeah,
50 years ago. Right.
The interstate system was designed during the Eisenhower years, or it was planned and conceived and executed during that period, so the 1950s.
Yeah, 75 miles an hour is wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. It was it was designed to accommodate average speeds of 70 to 75 miles an hour, assuming the cars of the 1950s. So, in those days, cars had drum brakes. Most did not have power steering. They certainly had none of the suite of safety equipment that cars have. They didn't have radial tires. When you drove 50 or 60 miles an hour in a car from that period, you really knew it. As opposed to today, where 50, 60 miles an hour it's hardly moving, so it seems. And the take-home point is that there has been no updating whatsoever of speed limits generally to reflect the fact that cars today are vastly more capable, vastly safer than they were some 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's just remarkable because I go to Europe, to the Autobahn, and these cars are going triple digit. I remember first time I was on there, I'm in this little Volkswagen Golf that could barely hit 95 miles an hour going down a hill. And these Porsches are passing me 150 miles an hour and like like it's going out of style. And there weren't mass pileups, there weren't mass deaths. And yet here, the nanny state's alive and well.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be grateful that they raised the speed limit to 65 miles an hour. I think in Texas, they've got a highway that you can go 80 miles an hour.
Yeah,
now.
Extremely rural out in the middle of nowhere. And that's anomalous. It's the one place in the country where you can technically go that fast. And in most other states, including my state, statutorily, driving faster than 80 miles an hour anywhere, even on a highway with a posted limit of 65 or 70, constitutes technical reckless driving.
Right. And
that means they can actually arrest you at gunpoint for that and impound your car and take you to jail.
I'd like to tell you it never happened to me, but I got dragged off one time in New Jersey because they didn't even know how fast I was driving because they caught up with me way too late. But I kind of talked my way down to 85 and then the cop didn't show up in court and got dismissed. But story for another day. But what is the rationale behind all these speed restrictions? It's certainly got nothing to do with safety, does it?
No, it doesn't. That's the excuse. It's control freakism, I think. That's my take on all of this. And it's also this desire to dumb everything down to the level of the least common denominator. And we're really circling the drain on that now. It's getting to the point where everything is premised on the least competent, the least able, rather than encouraging people to be competent, to exercise judgment, to be skillful, to take responsibility, which is the other side of the libertarian coin that I frequently talk about when I speak with people about these issues, because to non-libertarians, the first time they hear about it, they think, oh, you libertarians are just in favor of everybody doing whatever the hell they want, running amok, which is absolutely not true. It's about behaving like an adult. It's about exercising initiative and judgment and taking judicious risk, but being prepared to be responsible for any negative consequences if they occur.
Yeah, of course. Was it Montana that did away with speed limits for a while, and the standard was to drive at a speed that was reasonably prudent?
Correct. That actually was in effect for many decades, and the federal government, as is its practice, used the bully stick of withholding federal money from the state unless they got rid of the reasonable and prudent standard.
Right. What is wrong with reasonably prudent? I mean, that's a pretty objective standard.
Nothing. I think that it seems to me that if you cannot produce evidence other than a velocity that a person's driving somehow was endangering people, which to me would include, well, okay, he was clearly not in control of his car, he was weaving around the road, he was skidding. If you can't do that, then presumptively, I think that person's driving was in fact safe without the air quotes. Whereas what we have is a system that arbitrarily defines your driving as unsafe with the air quotes, simply because you've exceeded an arbitrary velocity that largely has just been pulled out of some bureaucrat's hat, that bears no relation to the road, to a reasonable pace for that road. The fact is that the majority of drivers on any given road in this country are technically speeding, and it ought to tell you something when the majority of the population routinely runs afoul of a law. Most people realize that prohibition back in the 1920s was idiotic, but the same principle applies today to the speed regime.
Yeah. It's just distressing when they criminalize the entire population. Same thing they did with prohibition, with alcohol. When they're making the entire population criminal, then you know something is really wrong. And Eric, we're not even talking about the amount of revenue that comes in, the employment of additional officers. Is this the best use of law enforcement's time, giving people tickets? Is it really the best use?
Not if the object is, peacekeeping. If the object is to legitimately keep people safe. The amount of time that the typical patrol officer spends handing out these trumped-up traffic tickets, I think, could far better be spent going after people who actually do commit real crimes, which I define as actions that involve a victim, robbery, rape, murder, and so on. There's enough of that going around, I think, to keep cops busy. And as far as speeding and traffic offenses go, there is something called the 85th percentile rule or standard that I wrote about. And if speed limits were set according to that, which they're supposed to be, most speed limits would be considerably higher than they are now, and the majority of the cars on the road would not be speeding. And the need for all these radar traps and all these tickets would largely go away.
And the millions of dollars that get spent on radar guns and training and just the system for courts and court personnel and lawyers, and it's just mind-boggling. And that's the same thing with the objective standard for driving while impaired.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Same thing. It's just a big trap for who are what mostly are law-abiding citizens, because my girlfriend is 5'3". Mm-hmm. She takes 2 drinks. She's definitely impaired. I'm 6'2", way over 200. I take 2 drinks. I don't even feel it, but our blood alcohol levels are probably pretty similar.
Sure. And not only that, it doesn't take into account not only the different metabolizing that goes on individual to individual, it doesn't take into account that individuals vary in terms of the skill and ability that they start out with. I can assure you that Bob Bondurant, even with 2 or 3 beers in him, is a vastly better driver than I am. And even if I'm completely sober. And by the same token, I assure you that even with 3 beers in me, I am a better, safer driver than my mother-in-law is. It's a fact.
Yeah.
The fixation on drunkenness too always struck me as kind of bizarre. To me, the thing to focus on would be evidence of impairment for whatever reason. We don't have, for example, senior citizen checkpoints. We don't randomly stop every person over, say, 50 or 60 and require them to submit to a battery of tests to prove that they're not senile. The presumption is that they're able to drive, regardless of what their age is. And yet we have these dragnet-style sobriety checkpoints where people who've given absolutely no reason whatsoever to suspect them of having had any drink, of not driving correctly, we force them to prove to the satisfaction of a roadside cop that they're not drunk. It totally upends one of the most profound and basic principles of a free society, and that is that you're innocent until you're proved guilty, not the reverse.
It's a nightmare, these motor vehicle laws, the way they've evolved. And you look at other countries, are they following the U.S. model mostly, these other countries, or do they just not care?
Well, it depends where you go. Let's use Germany as a comparison point. Not that I favor this necessarily, but in Germany, it is vastly more difficult to get a driver's license. You, as a new driver, have to take a very extensive and very long duration driver training course, and then you have to take a very extensive and rigorous test before you're issued your first driver's license. They take driving extremely seriously over there. One of the reasons that the Autobahn has a lower fatality rate per miles traveled than the U.S. interstate highway system, despite the fact that on the Autobahn it's routine for cars to run 130, 140, 150 miles an hour, is because they're very disciplined drivers. They use their rearview mirrors. If they see an overtaking vehicle, they get out of the way. They don't just park in the left lane with the cruise control on and start to text and fiddle with the radio.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Florida here, and I have my choice. I could take I-95 for free, or I could take the Florida State Turnpike, or they call it Florida's Turnpike now, and pay money. I will pay money to take the Florida Turnpike because I know that most of the old people won't, and the younger people can't afford to. Yeah. And those are the 2 primary dangerous classes of drivers. And it generally is much safer and less traffic, and I can drive faster. So I totally know what you're saying. In Germany, they're just better drivers for sure. And it's interesting that certain states, they drive much better than other states. I lived in Westchester County, New York, a lot of twisty, narrow, windy roads, much far superior drivers than down here in Florida, where they're all straight, wide open roads, and they can just have an accident in the middle of a perfect, clear day with no dangerous conditions. They can just choose to have an accident there. And they don't use their direction signals ever down here either. They're just there for ornamentation.
I purposely try to avoid that word accident because that implies random act of God. And most of these events are not accidents at all. They're the result. They're the result of driver error and could have been avoided. An accident is when a tree falls on your car or a deer leaps out of the woods and you just have no chance. There's nothing you could have done about it. The overwhelming majority of so-called accidents are the result of driver error that could have been avoided. There's a reason why some people are able to go a lifetime without ever so much as scuffing a fender, and then there are other people who seem to have an accident, so-called, every year or every 2 years.
Yeah, well, we all make mistakes, and sometimes the mistake occurs in a way that it's unforgiving, and usually you get away with it. And that's partially by experience too. But there are bad habits, and I'm a victim of some of them myself. The cell phone's the worst thing that ever happened to driving, for sure. It just reinforces distracted driving, something bad, and I've really worked hard. But there are apps like we were talking about, pre-call. Waze is one of the best things that's ever happened to driving, because it warns you of dangerous conditions, stopped cars on the side of the road, and police doing needless radar stops and things like that, accidents ahead, dangerous conditions, things like that. So, but yeah, it's just amazing what driving has devolved down to. But I was out in Arizona. They drive a good 20 miles an hour faster than here in Florida. Much better drivers than in Florida.
Yeah, and that's generally true in my neck of the woods being the rural South. And I think part of that is because kids tend to start driving well before the legal age. They start to drive tractors, of course, when they're 11, 10 years old, and then they start to drive their family truck at they're 14, 15. So by the time they actually are legally of age to drive, they've already got some experience, which I believe is a good thing, as opposed to the new thing, which is spreading across the country, is to delay and restrict young people's access to cars until they're virtually 18. On the theory that somehow that's going to make them safer. Well, experience is what makes you a better, safer driver, not staying away from the car.
Right. Hey, what about this concept, Eric, of simulators? Have they evolved to the point yet where they can really enhance your skills and really keep people out of accidents?
I really don't know. I've not encountered a driving simulator that would be comparable to or analogous to a flight simulator for aircraft for professional pilots.
Yeah.
I don't know that there is such a thing. There may be. I don't know. I wish I could be more detailed on that, but I honestly can't say.
Yeah, that would just be a great thing, especially for young kids, to really learn in a realistic and setting environment about things like alcohol, drug impairment, because that's where it's really bad. When you're a more experienced driver, alcohol impairment, less of a factor. But you're young, learning to master driving skills, that's where the alcohol impairment really is a distinct negative.
I'll toss out this one piece of advice to any parents who are listening to this that might be interested. In my opinion, one of the best things that you can do for your new teen driver is to get them a car with a manual transmission, something that forces them to be more involved with the business of actually driving the car. Modern cars, especially those with automatics, are so deceptively easy to operate. Literally, a monkey could do it. You push the start button, the thing turns on, you put the thing in drive, and it just kind of goes. And you trundle down the road at 70 or 80 miles an hour, and it really, one finger on the wheel, it doesn't seem like you need to do that much. And of course, you do. You need to pay attention to what's going on. With a manual transmission, you're forced to be more actively involved in driving the car. You have to develop a different skill set. I think it's very important for a young person first learning to drive to learn how to drive a stick shift car.
That really is great advice. And the number of cars being sold with the standard transmission keeps decreasing.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Small percentage now. And you are a better driver when you have to do it. Unfortunately, and I do enjoy driving a manual transmission auto, but problem is when you live near an urban area, a lot of traffic, it really gets to be a pain.
It does.
It really does.
That's part of the reason why they're going away. And the other reason why they're going away has to do with the unintended, or they might well be intended, consequences of the federal government's various mandates. In this case, the fuel efficiency mandate. Most people don't realize this, but today A given car with an automatic transmission will typically get better gas mileage than the same car with a manual. And that's because they've reduced the efficiency losses through the torque converter and via other means. The automatics now shift more precisely, more accurately, more perfectly than a human driver can. And the difference isn't huge. It's typically about 2 to 3 miles per gallon. And while that may not sound like a lot on an individual basis, and it's not, when it's factored out over the fleet of cars, meaning all the cars that the manufacturer makes in a given year, it really matters as far as something called CAFE, which I'm sure you're familiar with. It's the corporate average fuel economy requirement that all the car companies are required to meet. And if they don't meet, they get hit with these gas guzzler fees, which are taxes that are then passed on to the consumer that makes the car less competitive in the market. Oh, yeah, we know all about that. So I didn't realize that they had evolved to the point now where automatics were. But yeah, now they've got 9-speed automatic transmissions. So, the Fiat Chryslers.
Absolutely. Yep. So, and 8 speeds in the Mercedes and a bunch of others.
And even in performance cars, the new 911 Porsche does not come with it's only with the DPK automated manual.
Wow, that's amazing. I wasn't aware of that. So all these things combined, it's it makes total sense. Well, what's the how many gears is the best manual that you can get now? Can you get a 7-speed manual? I think it's 7 in the Corvette. Yeah, 7 in the Corvette. Yeah. So, and most people really aren't that great at driving manuals when you get down to it.
They're not.
I love watching a young kid who doesn't really know what they're doing, screw up on it.
Well, and today it's so easy. I grew up in the 80s, late 70s, and of course back in those days you didn't have hydraulic assist clutches. All cars today that have manuals have that. And if you drove a muscle car, I grew up with muscle cars. It was like doing leg presses at the gym and rowing a Muncie M22 heavy duty 4-speed or a Borg Warner Super T10. It took work. It was a challenge, and it was kind of neat because once you mastered that, you felt really good because it was an actual achievement to learn how to drive a car like that.
The synchro mesh transmissions, the whole thing. It's totally evolved since then, and it's impossible to hit the wrong gear now. But timing, your ear. I remember my father was an expert. Showed me how to, once you got into first, you really didn't need a clutch, but that was double clutching and all that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, the upside is that modern cars, particularly performance cars, have never been more powerful, more capable, quicker. But in a way, at least to me, to my way of thinking, they're less enjoyable. The driver is becoming more of a passive passenger. The vehicle is becoming more like a roller coaster ride in which you just kind of get in and sit there and experience it rather than actively directed.
Yeah, the driver has become like an imposition on the car.
I have an old muscle car. I have an old Trans Am from the 70s, and any new performance car would destroy it, not necessarily in straight line acceleration, but certainly in handling and braking. But when I get in that thing and the big 4-barrel kicks open and just the feel of it, the sound of it, it's a completely different experience. The thing is almost alive. The parallel that I often draw for people when I talk about it, if you've ever seen an old steam locomotive, with the big wheels and chung chung chung, I mean that it's a mechanical thing that seems to have a heart and a soul, and it's almost a living thing, and that's what attracted me to cars as a kid, and to motorcycles, and I think today's cars are more like appliances. They're brilliant appliances, but they're devoid of heart and character.
That is a great point. Hey, Eric, we got to get going. Tell us where we find you, how we connect with you on the internet.
Okay, the website is epautos.com. And I'm on Twitter. It's kind of awkward, but I'm the Libertarian Car G. They wouldn't let me have Guy, so it's just G.
Yeah, that's the way it works sometimes. And hey, of course, you can always find us, find Eric through the link on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. And while you're there, take a look at all the work that Stefan, our webmaster, is doing. Spends hours every day getting you the information that you need. And Eric, it's really been fun. Hey, nice to talk to a car guy.
Let me know if you'd like to have me back on.
Hey, absolutely. We will have you back on. And hey, libertarian car guys, it just seems to go hand in hand. And Eric, you be well. Thanks so much.
You too. Thank you, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.